During the Saturnalia celebrations, holly and other greens were hung over doorways as part of a pagan ritual to ward off evil. To deck the halls with boughs of holly was to acknowledge the powers of the nature gods. According to Wiccan rituals, placing holly or other greens in the shape of a circle or wreath accentuated its magical power. Similarly, mistletoe, when used in the casting of Wiccan or Druidic spells, could render a woman helpless and open to sexual exploitation. This is where we get our custom of hanging mistletoe in doorways today, and if a woman is caught underneath, she may be kissed and must not resist.
The fir tree, the mistletoe, all of these things typically come from overtly pagan traditions, typically from Northern Europe, German, Norse, and English.
Likewise, evergreen trees have always represented sex and fertility in pagan cultures. During the winter solstice, trees would be chopped down, brought inside, set up, and decorated as idols for worship.
The Christmas tree was regarded as a sacred tree. The pagans of Northern Europe typically worshipped trees. They regarded trees and groves as sacred. So the bringing of the tree into the house would be a way of bringing this supernatural source of blessing into your home. That was the whole idea, that there were spirits who resided in the trees.
In the Middle Ages, the tradition of the winter solstice Christmas tree primarily took root in Germany. During his reign, King George I, himself of German extraction, brought the custom to Victorian England. German immigrants settling in Pennsylvania did the same in America during the early 1800s. In 1848, the London Illustrated News published this famous engraving depicting Queen Victoria and her royal family beside a decorated Christmas tree. And within a few years, nearly every English household had their own tree in allegiance to the monarchy. By 1900, the U.S. Forest Service estimated that at least 1 in 5 homes in America had adopted the Christmas tree tradition. Thousands of years earlier, God, speaking through the prophet Jeremiah, warned against this pagan practice in the Old Testament. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the ways of the heathen, for the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, they deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers, that it move not. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good.
Well, there's a lot more to that story. But time does not permit. But I think it's interesting. I think it helps put things a little bit in historical perspective, because I think a lot of Christians today think that celebrating Christmas was perhaps initiated by the apostles, or maybe at least the early church, and as we can see, far from it. Very often we even tend to think as believers that these unbelievers have come in and spoiled our holiday. It's almost the other way around in many respects. But I guess the question is, am I or John MacArthur suggesting that all Christians, therefore, should necessarily stop celebrating Christmas? Well, the short answer to that is on your outline. No. No, I'm not necessarily saying that. Of course, that comes with a pretty big disclaimer regarding the snares and dangers of many of these so-called Christmas traditions that have grown near and dear to many of our hearts. And listen, I really want you to hear my heart on this. I cannot emphasize enough that the point of this morning is not to dictate to anyone in here whether you celebrate Christmas or not, or how you celebrate specifically Christmas. That, to a large degree, is between you and the Lord. But that said, as soon as I say that, the legalists veer off over here and go, well, he's saying between the lines, you'd be a fool to, and absolutely anything that does that, they're all pagan idolaters. And then you got the carnal, worldly people who shift over here and go, well, I can read between the lines. He's saying it's perfectly okay. And I'm not saying either. I'm not saying either of those things. What I want to do is give you some tools to help you be discerning as to where and how to draw those lines for yourself by the Word of God. In fact, let me start by saying in a very similar situation recorded in the book of Mark and also Matthew, but we'll use Mark's version. Jesus speaking ironically to religious men, people who were kind of churchgoers, who were making a point of saying that what they were doing was because of their traditions, and what they were doing with these traditions, they said, was to worship God. And the word, as we'll see, that they used to worship God was from the heart. Despite that, these particular individuals, and in their case it was the Pharisees, who were saying that according to their tradition they could not use their money to take care of their parents, but the tradition held that they could devote it to the temple. Coincidentally, that meant they didn't have to financially be responsible for their parents. So Jesus took them to task on this point, because their traditions had done what? Their traditions, that if you devote money to the temple, not bad, but if you're doing it now and it's beginning to infringe upon the clear, plain teachings of the commands of God, now we've got a problem. And my suggestion is, if that has happened in your life at Christmas time, if the traditions have now become outweighing, so important to you that they actually outweigh the clear commands of God, well, then this verse is for you as well. Listen.
You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain.